Welcome. Thank you for your interest for this session. I see a full house. Thank you for joining us. My name is Demi Albus. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager in Cloud and Enterprise Marketing team. And I know you want to hear from engineering, so I have a great technical expert with me, Benny Lakinishok, who is a Program Manager in Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics engineering team. He's also a member of a company that we have acquired recently, Airado. So he will tell you all about the story of Airado. Yesterday at keynote stage, Brad Anderson introduced a brand new technology, Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics. This is a technology that helps organizations like you, IT departments, to identify security breaches before they cause damage. In this session, we will tell you what this technology is, what's the story behind it, how does it work, what are the benefits, what are the key features. And I know that you're interested in demonstrations. We'll do a very seamless deployment. Actually, I will do a demo, yes. I'll do a deployment. Benny is going to show you how easy it is, because I haven't done a deployment for this yet. So he will show you how easy to deploy Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, and then we will show you a user interface, how all these attacks are showing up. You will see the beautiful user interface that we have. With that, let's go ahead and get started. I would like to share some statistics about the cybersecurity attacks. You have heard some of these at the keynote stage. We're all aware of the cybersecurity threats that are happening. Every morning when I wake up, I see another reputable organization being breached. Large financial organizations, large retail organizations, even government, not necessarily immune when it comes to cybersecurity attacks. Attackers' techniques have changed significantly. The fact of the matter is, the frequency and sophistication of these attacks are getting worse. A lot of research companies do a lot of research to understand whether there is any commonalities with these specific cybersecurity attacks. We see over 75% of these attacks traced back to weak or stolen user credentials. Identity becomes the new perimeter of the organization. And not only that, we see that these attackers stay within a system more than 200 days before detection, almost 8 months, quite a long time. The cost is significant. The cost to the global economy is $500 billion. And the average cost of a data breach to a company is about $3.5 million. And we all know that. That's top of the iceberg. So what's happening? How did they get so good? How are they so clever? They're compromising user credentials more than 75% of the time. At Microsoft, we say that identity is the new control plane. The former CEO of Airado, Idan, always tells me, Demi, identity is the new perimeter of an organization, which is true. If they want to get access to a network, they specifically look for that user, because users are really the blind spot in an organization. They have really complex interactions with devices and resources, and they fall to phishing emails. They click on links. They don't change their passwords. These attackers specifically look for that non-privileged user who hasn't changed his or her password more than 200 days. In certain cases, they look for a vendor's password. We have seen with very famous breaches recently. And they move laterally until they access a privileged user's account. And once they access the sensitive information, the game is over. They're using legitimate IT tools more than malware. I was reading the story of one of the famous breaches, and 80% of the time, they use legitimate IT tools rather than malware, because they're clever, they don't want to be caught. And they're staying in the network for more than 8 months. One of the IT security directors I talked to told me that, Demi, they don't come into my network anymore with bombs and explosives. They come with chopsticks and toothpicks. They lay low. Every day they figure something out. And one day, once they access my sensitive information, game is over. As I said, cost is really huge. Financial loss, brand reputation. A lot of people in this room probably got their credit cards changed before even asking for it this year. Consumers are worried. Executives lose their jobs. IT security teams are impacted. We all have these traditional IT security solutions. Why are they not helping us? Because first of all, they're complex. It takes at least anywhere from 1 to 2 months to 1 to 2 years to really have a solid system. You set it up, you create rules, you create thresholds, baselines, you fine-tune, you monitor. It takes quite a long time. We are living in a world now that we already assume breach. When I talk to IT organizations, they tell me that I'm quite sure that there are attackers in my system right now. They're just waiting for the right moment. We don't have the time to invest in these solutions when there's attackers currently in our system looking for the right moment. Not only these solutions take a very long time to set up, but they're also giving you a lot of false positives. Again, I talk to a lot of IT members, and they tell me, Demi, I don't know how to do my job a million times. I get 50 reports every day. By the way, they're full of false positives. So even if I read them, I won't be able to get the information I need. You give me a haystack when I'm looking for a needle. Why they're giving us false positives? Because they are primarily designed to protect the perimeter of an organization. When identity becomes the new perimeter, they don't help us as much. Traditional IT networks, there was an analogy that was used to me once, is similar to M&Ms. They're really hard in the outside, but once you crack through the shell, it's really soft in the inside, and you can maneuver to get to the sensitive information. Attackers are getting really clever, and they're very intelligent. So our ways have to improve to match what they're doing. That's why we have acquired this hot startup called Aerato, because they had a great technology. And we designed Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics together. It's an on-premises solution that helps you to identify security breaches before they cause damage. Before I dive into details, and Benny goes into details, I want to use an analogy to describe this. I want to tell you a story. Probably it will be very familiar to you. 2 weeks ago, I'm preparing for Ignite. I'm in the office at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I get a call from my bank. They tell me that, well, we see some charges at 5 a.m. in your credit card transactions history from Virginia. Did you buy anything from Virginia? I'm like, no, I'm located in Redmond, Washington. So they canceled my card, and they sent me a new card. This is a very common story to all of you. Or they send me an alert and say, hey, we see this charge for $4,000 in your credit card history. You don't necessarily charge $4,000 for a single transaction. So there's something happening here. Can you help us? And if this is a suspicious activity, and if I confirm that it's not me, then they will go ahead and send me a new card. Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics brings this concept from the credit card side to the IT side to the employees and vendors of an organization in a more advanced and sophisticated way. How? We use behavioral analysis. Some of you may be familiar with this new category called user behavior analysis. If identity is the new perimeter, if identity is the blind spot in an organization, we have to understand a user's behavior first. And user behavior analysis specifically focuses on that. What is normal behavior for a user? What is an abnormal behavior for a user? So when an attacker is hiding under the identity of an innocent user, we can catch them when they start to do something weird. For instance, Benny has 3 different devices. He has a Windows laptop, he has a Windows phone, and he has a Surface device. He primarily accesses, as you can know, engineering documents, and he is located in Israel. If tomorrow Benny starts to access corporate resources from 50 different devices in US, Europe, and Asia, and suddenly he tries to access financial documentation or customer PII information, and he starts to work for 23 hours. Normally he works for 18. So he exceeds his time. He exceeds his time.
True story.
It's really true. So he exceeds his time for 5 hours. Then we will raise a red flag, and we'll tell you there is something suspicious about Benny's behavior. An attacker may be hiding under his identity. How do we do this? We leverage machine learning. We leverage Active Directory information. That way we can understand what is a normal behavior for an entity. You will ask, what is entity? Entity is user, devices, resources. So we understand all the interactions that Benny has with the devices that he has and with the resources in the organization. This is a very key part of our technology, but we don't stop there. We take user behavior analysis to the next level. We detect known malicious attacks and known security issues as well. Pass the hash, pass the ticket, overpass the hash, brute force, reconnaissance, clear text passwords. We look into your network. If that attack is happening already, we will look for that and we will find it. So you can have a full story of what's happening. Oh, there is an attack here, and there is suspicious behavior happening with Benny's credentials. Then you identify what's happening in your network. And then you can figure out advanced attacks. You may have heard of other user behavior analysis solutions in the marketplace. Why you will love our solution? Why do we think that this is the best solution? Because we detect threats really fast. We don't get lost in the network traffic. We use deep packet inspection technology. Idan always tells me, Demi, the information is really in the data sources. You really need to use DPI to understand what is happening. We look at all Active Directory-related traffic. We look at information in Active Directory, and we don't stop there. We collect information from security information and event management systems. So we are really fast. And the intelligence is already built in. So you don't have to create rules. You don't have to create a baseline. Everything is already built in. Once you deploy it, it will start learning and understanding, and it will catch malicious attacks. One of the complaints, as I mentioned earlier, was the number of security reports that you receive. We didn't want to send you 50 reports a day. Instead, the team created this beautiful user interface. It's a web user interface, and it looks like a convenience feed. It's like a Facebook feed that you can see all activities on a simple timeline, all attacks, all information about suspicious activities, all in a single timeline. So we can reduce the noise and focus on what's important. The technology adapts and learns every day. It builds this organizational security graph, which is an entity interaction map that shows the context of all the users and devices and resources interacting with each other. So if tomorrow Benny comes with another device, it will not immediately say, like, oh, there's a red flag. No. We'll say, well, it learns. Benny has a new device. So we will add that to our learning. Our team specifically focused on reducing false positives because we know this is a huge headache. We will only raise red flags when they're contextually aggregated. And we will not only compare an entity's behavior to itself, but for other entities with its interaction map. You may ask, well, maybe I have some attackers in my system. Maybe they already have been accessing the network from 50 different devices. Will you catch that? Even if I deploy this tomorrow. Well, we not only compare that entity's behavior to itself, as I said, so this means that we will set that as an outlier at the very beginning, and we will keep reporting on it, so you will know what's going on. Before I turn to Benny, I would like to mention a couple of key features. We provide support for mobility. Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics witnesses all authentication and authorization on corporate resources. Either they reside on premises or on mobile devices or elsewhere. We integrate very well with SIEM. Some of you already have security information and event management solutions. We have a two-way integration. We collect relevant events from SIEM to enrich our attack timeline. We also send information to SIEM so you can see everything on a single control plane. If you want to send email alerts to specific people, we can configure that. And finally, we have a very seamless deployment process. I'm not very familiar with the deployment. You will see me deploying it. It is non-intrusive. It doesn't impact your current existing network topology. It's designed to stay invisible to the attackers. And it's a software. You can install it either on hardware or virtual machines. Now I'd like to turn to Benny. He will tell you the exciting story of AirAuto, how they started this business, and then he will show you how it works.
Thanks, Demi. Hi, everyone. Enjoying Ignite so far?
Yes.
Good to hear. So as Demi said before we dive into the technical details, I'd like to share the story of how our Rato came to be. So our founder and CEO, Dan Plotnik, who is hiding somewhere in the audience. Hi, Dan. He owned a security consulting company, and on one of his jobs, he did a pen testing in one of the major banks in Israel. And to make a long story short, within a few weeks, he gained from a standard user rights to a domain admin rights and basically owned the network. And then, again, to make a long story short, this started the thinking process. Oh, and this is a major bank in Israel, as I said. So as you can imagine, they have millions of dollars of solutions and products invested in security. And yet, nobody came to him and said, what are you doing? He started with various reconnaissance phases, and all the way up to pass the ticket, pass the hash. And nobody said there's something going on. No system or security solution alerted. So he basically just owned the system, owned the bank, and nothing alerted. So this really started the thinking process. And in the initial phases, he understood that this is all about identity, that 100% of attacks are about identity, which is why we chose the first data source that we analyze to be Active Directory. So we have 3 data sources we analyze. The first one, as Demi mentioned, is the traffic going to Active Directory. So we use port mirroring configuration, and I'll explain a bit further on that, to get all of the traffic that Active Directory gets so we can analyze it. And think about it. When you log in the morning to your computer, when you access a file share, when you access SharePoint or Exchange or any other resource on the network, you need to go to Active Directory to be authenticated, whether it's NTLM or Kerberos or any other authentication protocol, and then get authorization data, and then you access the resource. So whatever it is you're doing or the identity is doing, you need to go to Active Directory. So that's a focal point. So if we analyze all of the traffic that Active Directory gets, we understand what everybody is doing. So that's the first data source. The second data source is Active Directory itself, just as a repository for all users, computers, groups, etc. So we understand what's the interactions between the users. So if that's my manager, if that is my peer, in what group am I? Is this a sensitive group? Am I sensitive? So we use Active Directory as a repository as well. And the third one, which is rather new, are the SIEMs. So as Demi mentioned, we have a bidirectional integration with SIEMs. So we get events from the SIEMs, so we can enrich the view that we have on an organization, and we send the events, or what we call a suspicious activity, as I will demonstrate soon. So if we have a pass the ticket attack, that's one suspicious activity. If there is a brute force attack, that's another suspicious activity in the attack timeline. So whenever we find a suspicious activity, we have send an event for that to the SIEM, just in case your security operations want to have the SIEM as the first focal point to be alerted on. So that's the third data source. And we analyze all of them in real time. After we analyze them, we start learning and profiling what are the entities doing, what everybody on the network are doing. Again, this happens in real time within a few seconds. And then we detect. We have several ways we detect. We have some deterministic algorithms, which I'll explain later, and we have a machine learning algorithm to understand and profile what all of the entities are doing, if this behavior is normal or is it abnormal. If I'm, as Demi mentioned, if I'm working more hours, less hours, if I'm working from various different devices that have never worked before, if I'm just accessing a ton of resources that nobody else, that I didn't access before. And not only does the machine learning algorithm compares my behavior to myself, but also to my peers over time. So if I'm doing something that's abnormal to my group. So in terms of detection, we have 3 categories which we alert on or we detect to. We have security issues. So for example, clear text passwords being sent over the network, which is something whenever we install this product in a customer environment, we, within a few minutes, see this service account or this product here is misconfigured and is sending the password of this service account, which sometimes is a very sensitive or privileged identity in clear text. And that's something many attackers want to grab. So that's a security issue. That's one example. Malicious attacks. So this is the main part for all of the deterministic detection algorithms. So we detect a bulk load of stuff, just to name a few: pass the ticket, pass the hash, as you might have heard, overpass the hash, forge pack, which is rather new, golden ticket, this new skeleton key that was discovered that sits on the domain controller, and various reconnaissance stages that are in the beginning, they're happening, brute force attack, and more. And just one note on this: sometimes some of the customers we talk to, they say, okay, this is a signature-based algorithm or detection. And we say no. We don't care which malware, specific malware or specific program execute these attacks. All we care about is the tactic and the technique. So we care about the pattern that this leaves behind. So it's nothing signature-based. And lastly, we have the abnormal behavior, which is a machine learning algorithm that just analyzes all of the organization, all of the entities all the time, and learns and really differentiates if you're doing something that's unique from your group or suspicious to your past behavior. A good example for catching an attack for the abnormal one is the Snowden case. So Snowden didn't he didn't do pass the ticket. He didn't do any advanced attack that, caused a lot of havoc in the network. Basically what he did is he used his credentials, right, his own identity, to access tons of resources all of a sudden. So that's something that is not an actual attack, right? But with the abnormal behavior algorithm we have, we would have caught that because we would have seen, okay, that's what he's usually doing, accessing these 2 laptops and these 10 servers, and all of a sudden he's doing a lot more. And we will alert on that on real time. So that's the abnormal behavior. So let's dive a bit deeper on how we do what we do. So we have 2 server roles. We have the gateway and a center. The gateway is the first role. And the gateway needs to be configured with port mirroring from the domain controller. So we are agentless, no drivers, no installation. We are non-intrusive. That's the beauty here. But in order to get the kind of information we need, we do need port mirroring. So if you have physical domain controllers and a physical switch or a physical router, you would need to configure on the router port mirroring from the port that reaches the domain controller to our port, to the port of our server role called the gateway. Then the gateway gets that traffic. It also queries Active Directory, and it can get events from the SIEM as well. And it does some real-time parsing, which I'll explain in a couple of slides. And then sends that parsed traffic to the center. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we store all of that parsed traffic in the database. That's where we do all of the profiling, machine learning, and all of the deterministic algorithms to detect weaknesses and attacks. And as we mentioned, we have a bidirectional connectivity with the SIEM. So we can either get events we have a syslog listener that can get events from the SIEM, whichever SIEM you want, so we support all of them. And we also send the events via syslog. So in terms of the SIEM, you don't need to configure anything, just a simple forwarding rule to send us specific events we look for. So let's dive a bit deeper. So basically, the 2 server roles, if I look at them at high level, are this pipe of components that are being fired upon 24/7 with network activities, with traffic, events, whatever. So the first part in this huge pipe is the actual traffic. So we take traffic from the wire, from our capture NIC that you just configured port mirroring for, and we take the traffic and we start parsing that. So that's the first part. We can listen to multiple domain controllers from one gateway. We have a sizing for that. It's all about how many packets per second are the domain controllers producing. And we have a sizing tool for that. We'll publish some numbers soon on TechNet as well. But basically, I would say if you have very busy domain controllers, then a couple of domain controllers per gateway. If you have less, we have a customer with 1 gateway with 10 domain controllers. So it all depends on the amount of traffic, and like I said, we have a sizing tool for that. We then get events for the SIEM as well, and when we get the traffic, what really differentiates us from the other solutions on the market is that we don't only we also do resolution against those entities. So we see the traffic, we see this IP address, but we do deep packet inspection. So we see within the Kerberos ticket, okay, that's the machine name. And we go and actually verify that this is the machine name. We go to Active Directory to get all of the properties of that entity, of that identity, and we bind all of that together. So you have a very full, detailed for each network packet that's being sent over the wire. And we do this in a very efficient way. So after we take all of the traffic, we do the parsing of the traffic, we combine the data on the actual entities on the network that we saw within the packet, we combine all of that, and we send all of that parsed traffic to the center. In the center as well, we have a few components. I'm not going to dive too deep on that part, but basically we get the traffic and we get the entities. We do some analysis to correlate between them, to make sure that it makes sense. We do the profiling, which I'll demo in a bit, so you can visualize every entity, every user or computer. We have a lot of data points for that, so that's all being done in the profiling stage. We then write that to the database, and in parallel, all of this is happening in parallel in the center box, in the center server. We do the machine learning algorithm, and we do the deterministic detections for known attacks. And with that, let's do a deployment. So Demi is going to help us out here, just so you can see that this is a very straightforward and quick deployment. So just before we start, I have five VMs in this environment. I have a domain controller, I have a center, I have a gateway, and I have 2 client machines, which we will use later to simulate an attack. But for now, we'll just use the center and the gateway. So this is the center. Yeah, just double click. Okay, this is how our wizard looks like. You accept after you read the YOLO, of course. So here we have a few parts. So the first one is where we install the actual product, the installation path. The second box is the database data path. So in here, we'll just keep it as it is, but in your environment, it's recommended to have another drive where we keep the database in. And again, we have a sizing for that, but we are talking about from, if it's just a lab, then a few gigabytes, and if it's a full-blown environment with 100 domain controllers, it can go up to 40 or 50 terabytes, depending on your environment. Sorry? No, we use MongoDB. And so here, let's just have 10 gigabytes. And OK, so now we have another 2 areas here. We have center communication, and we have management IP. So the center communication is our listening IP address on the center to get the data from the gateways. So this is the communication port between the gateway and the center. That's how the gateways know where to send. So let's change that to 10.0.0.12. Yep. And you see we have a port number here. So because this is the same IP address in my lab, we need to change the port, because the management is using 443 by default, and that's not changeable, because we don't want you to go to the browser and change that and take off the port thing in the web browser. But for the center communication or the gateway, we don't care, because it's in the configuration, and it just works like that. So let's change that to 444, for example. And you need to choose certificates. Now, in your environment, in production environment, you would probably choose your own certificates from your PKI infrastructure. But here in the lab or in your labs, we can just tick the create self-signed certificates. Yep. And with that, we're good to go. Install.
What server are you using?
Sorry, again?
What is the web server? Is it Tomcat or
It's IIS. So while we wait, after this finishes, the finish button will change to launch. It will launch our web UI to finish the configuration for the gateway so we can download the package. And the crucial part in the gateway configuration is to enter user credentials of a regular user service account that we create for the gateways, so it can query via LDAP, securely, of course, the domain controller to resolve the entities in the network. Okay? So in a few seconds, this will finish and launch. This will launch the web browser. Yep. This is just in my lab. Once the logon UI loads up, and by the way, so the people that have the privilege to log on to the UI or to our system are either local admins on the center machine or part of the local group we create on the center machine, which is called Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytic Administrators. So either one of these two groups, the local admins or the Microsoft ATA admins, can log on here. In this case, we'll just use an admin account. She knows all my passwords, by the way. Okay, so you see we have domain connectivity settings for gateways. This is a common setting for all of the gateways. So let's enter Contoso, and the username is ATA. Just a service account. This user doesn't need admin rights, just regular domain user group. That's all it needs. And let's save, and now we can download the gateway package. I'll just click once, that's fine. No. It's going to download soon.
Oh.
Just a sec. Give it a sec. Yeah. It's important to run a security scan. So we do that. Actually, no, that's IE. OK, let's open the folder. So go to Downloads and copy that zip file. And this zip file can be used on all gateways. So you have a package, and whatever the amount of gateways you have, you just copy that among them. So let's right-click here. I have a share already prepared, gateway setup. So that's a share on the gateway I just created, just for convenience sake. And now let's minimize this window here. Let's move to the gateway. Yeah. Right-click and gateway setup. So by the way, we finished with the center. There are a few more configurations I can show you later, but basically the center is set up. That's it. So let's double-click on the gateway setup.
Do your gateways have to be a separate server?
It can be in a one-box solution, so it can be the same server. If you have a very small environment, you can have that. Yeah.
What about co-location?
Yeah. So I said one-box solution means, sorry if I didn't explain myself, it's where you install the center and the gateway on the same machine. You can have that. Let's hold the question for later, sorry. Don't worry, we'll stay here and we'll answer all questions. So let's continue with the deployment. So this is the gateway, and you can see it's a bit different. So here we need to choose a certificate. Now you might ask yourself, okay, why do we need a certificate on the gateway? The management UI is on the center, right? So what we do is we have mutual certificate authentication between the gateway and the center, so that only approved gateways with a certificate that's going to be pre-enrolled here, and I'll explain in a second what do I mean by that, can communicate with the center. So if an attacker knows, and we are assuming that this attacker could potentially know that you have this product on your environment, then it can send us or fake a gateway and send fake data to the center so that it can head fake us, basically. But we created this mutual authentication so that it cannot. Now, the username here and password that's needed, again, it's either a local admin on the center or Microsoft ATA admin on the center, and we use that to take the certificate we just selected or created to bind that to the center. Tell him, okay, you see this certificate from this machine? That's the only way you can get traffic from that server. So we bind that once so that the center knows who he's going to talk to. In the beginning here, we install a few prerequisites. That's going to take a few seconds to install all of the prerequisites. And after those are done, we'll install the product. And again, when this finishes, and I think this is finished just now, again, we launch the web UI. And this is not a web UI on the gateway. This is the IP address of the center. So everything is managed from the center. And let's log in. And once we log in, we'll need to configure a couple of more settings, and we're done. And these are the settings. So as you can see, we have a new gateway here. It says configuration required. The first one being are the names, the fully qualified domain names of the domain controller which we are monitoring, which we configured port mirroring for. So in our case, we just have one, dc1.contoso.com. Our beloved Contoso. Yeah, and the second thing to choose here is which of the capture nicks on the gateway is which of the nicks on the gateway is the capture nick, what we call the capture nick. That's the nick where the port port mirroring configuration is set to send the packets to. Okay, so I just label them, and we document that in TechNet as well, just capture. So if you have multiple capture NICs, you would have capture 1, capture 2, capture 3. So it's easier to configure and save. And that's it. That was the deployment. So now, yeah, we can go to the UI. You can switch to the attack timeline. So obviously, there are no attacks at the moment, right? There's nothing. Well, maybe there are. But what we can do is, and maybe that's not ready just yet, but in a couple of seconds it will, you have a search bar at the top, right? Where Demi just tried typing her user. And what we do is, and by the way, the product just started 10 seconds ago, so let's give it 10 seconds more to just sync everything from AD and do the profiling. And once that's done, we can actually access and see what are our entities. Is there something suspicious about them, even if it's not an attack? So we can have a look at our profiles. And let's try again. Try Demi. Yeah, it's already synced. Great. So you can see our profile. Right now, there is not a lot of stuff interesting except from the password here. You can see we have a hint that says password never expires. We also have other hints like empty password if the user doesn't have any password. So we have a lot of hints here in the profile. And you know what? Actually, before we do the last demo, let me go and show you a full UI from one of our other environments. So you can see what the attack timeline is all about. Great. So this is, as you maybe saw yesterday, this is the attack timeline. We have various attacks here. I'm going to go deeper on some of them. And let's go to this first one. So the suspicious activity of abnormal behavior. This is the suspicious activity of abnormal behavior. That's the result of our machine learning algorithm. In this case, you can see that Michael Dubinsky, this identity here, and you can see everything is clickable, and everything has this mini profile over here, which I'll explain maybe a bit later. You can see that it used 2 normal computers. That's the computer that it's usually logging into. And for some reason, it logged in on other 7 computers, which is abnormal. And you can see here what are the resources that it's usually accessing and what's abnormal. You can also have a detailed view of that, where it describes one by one what's normal and what's abnormal by red and black. You can see where it logged in from, what did it access. So this is very clear, very simple, basically behavior analysis and display for what happened here. And let's click on this entity here to have a look at the profile. So you can see we have group membership. We have something called activities. This is the actual changes within Active Directory of this entity. You can see here something suspicious already, that it was added to the main admins, and then it was removed from the main admins. That's something to note just by itself. Let's go back to the summary. Again, you can see passwords, when did it failed. You can see the AD structure, who is managing that guy. So he's managed by Dan, which is very weird. You know, whenever Dan is involved somewhere, that's weird. You can see where did that computer logged on and which access did it. So you can see that this specific, so Michael Dubinsky is a full-time employee in Microsoft now. So he shouldn't be using this external vendor PC. So that's weird. So just by hovering here, I have this mini profile. And you can see that this specific entity, or computer in this case, is involved in 4 suspicious activity. So let's click on that entity and go to that profile. So we can see the IP address. Again, we can see a lot of details here. I just go to the suspicious activity tab of that specific entity, of this computer, and you can see the exact history. We tie together the exact history of that computer, in which attacks or in which suspicious activity is that entity involved in. So I think that's very interesting. And let's talk about the first one here, the honey token activity. So we had a feature, or a suspicious activity called honey token, which you can create fake users like SQL admin, super user, stuff that catches the eye of an attacker. You need to tell all of the IT people, right, not to touch that user. And once we detect an activity from that user, we will alert. And most attacks, months before they start, or when they actually cause damage, they would trigger this suspicious activity. So you would know months in advance, before there is some damage, that there is an attacker in your premise. So this is the first clue here for an attack. After that, from that same machine, he used the count enumeration. And this form of attack enumeration is using the first few steps of Kerberos to enumerate a count to see if that account exists and we need to authenticate, or if it doesn't exist. And by the way, this attack and others, by the way, don't even create anything in the security event log on the domain controller. So even the SIEM don't have the visibility in order to see that. And if they would, you have like 1 billion of events per hour, so it's noise and nothing more. After that, it did the brute force on the existing account that he found. You can see that he potentially guessed 2 accounts in this brute force attack. One of them is Michael Dubinsky, and then all of a sudden, Michael Dubinsky started behaving in a weird way. So we have a very clear attack timeline to tell you what's going on. And I think this is very, very cool, just by itself. Yes, thank you. So lastly, what we want to do now is I'm going to go back to the environment that Demi just deployed, and we're going to simulate pass the ticket in real time, and then we'll see what happens. So Demi is using her corporate machine, or supposedly in this story now, to access. So Demi is for marketing, so she's accessing marketing material. So this is a very secret file called ATA vNext secrets. So that's what we plan for vNext. OK, Demi, thanks.
All right.
So I'm going to simulate what the attacker would do if he was already on her machine, like it happens in many scenarios. So I'm going to open up my attack tool, and I'm going to steal her identity by stealing her Kerberos tickets. So all of this would have happened automatically by the attacker. I'm just doing this manually, right? So let's go to the attacker's machine now, where it would control the attack from. In this case, I'm the attacker. And I'm going to go to client 1. I'm going to copy the specific Kerberos ticket to access the resource she just used. And actually, before that, I'm going to show you that I'm going to use klist to enumerate all of the Kerberos tickets on this session. As you can see, this is benny@contoso.com, nothing else. So I've logged in as Benny, and that's why I have, obviously, my Kerberos tickets, right? And if I'll do dir whack DC1 marketing, which is the share she accessed, I'm going to get access denied. Can everybody see that? Great. So I just got access denied. Now, I'm going to inject the ticket I stole from Demi. I'm going to actually do pass the ticket. So let's have a look at what klist has to say now. Let's clear that. klist. Now I'm Demi. And Demi didn't log in here. OK? And now that I'm Demi, for sure, I can access the marketing shell. And I can also do this. And now I can have access to a share, which I shouldn't have permissions for, because this is only for Demi. But then again, now I am Demi just by stealing her ticket. So this is all good and well, right? Maybe some of you already seen what pass the ticket all means. That's not the intent here. The intent here is to show you that for the first time, we have a product that can alert on pass the ticket in real time. So I'm going to go back to the center, which Demi just deployed. And if everything is working as it should, pass the ticket. Thank you. So as you can see, we have client 1 where Demi logged in, and then I stole Demi's account to client 2, and I accessed a CIFS protocol on DC1, which is the file share on DC1. So that's what we have in this UI. And with that, I give it to you.
Yes. As you've seen, Let's go back to the presentation. Are we back? 5. All right. As we have seen, this is such an easy product. It's really designed for simplicity. That's something that we really loved about this technology. From deployment to the attack timeline, there are no reports. It looks like a Facebook feed. I can see everything on a simple timeline. I can see what's happening. So rather than getting lost in the network traffic noise, I really can focus on what's important. And that's the one thing that a lot of IT security teams asked us. This is a great solution on premises. I would like to summarize a few points before we open up for questions. We want to leave as much time as questions because we know that this is a new technology and we're quite sure that you have a lot to ask. We're really taking user behavior analysis to the next level with this technology. We're not only looking at entity behavior, but we are also looking for malicious attacks, as Benny showed, in real time. We don't only stop in analyzing users, we also look for known security issues, known security risks. So we really redefine this area. And it's really designed for simplicity, from a deployment stage to the attack timeline. This product is available today for public preview. We wanted to get it to you because we know that you need this technology because we have attackers in our systems, all of us do. So we want to make sure that you can use this technology, test it today. It's available at microsoft.com/ATA. So go ahead and try it and tell us, like, what do you like? What are your opinions? Give us feedback. We have a discussion forum on our website. We have detailed frequent asked questions documents. We have all of our collateral there. So please go ahead and check our documentation, and please let us know what you think. And at the same time, we are also located in an enterprise mobility booth, in a booth area, an expo area. Please come by if you have more questions. If you want to follow up with us, we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. The product team is here from Israel, and they're ready to answer your questions. With that, I think our slide froze, but let's open up for questions now. I thought that the question would be for Penny. No, it's we are going to announce pricing and licensing at general availability. Currently, we are not making a pricing and licensing announcement. All Microsoft licensing experts are going to be acknowledged about this solution this week, actually. So if you're interested in following up with us, please reach out to your Microsoft account specialist. We will share the detailed information at general availability. The Microsoft account specialists are going to be acknowledged about the pricing this week, yes.
On the center, is it possible to load balance or make a redundant server behind maybe an F5?
So we will have an announcement at general availability on how we scale this out. There will be a scale-out solution for general availability. You don't need to worry about that.
Okay, so for now, we're just focused on
Yeah.
just testing it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, sorry? Yes, you can definitely use tabs for the port mirroring configuration to help you with that.
So in the VM environment for the network,
Yeah.
multiple PCs.
So if you have multiple domain controllers on the same host, you would just need one gateway on that host to get the traffic from all of those hosts. But it also depends on the hypervisor solution. If it's some solutions may limit you on that, but basically, yeah.
Can one gateway handle DCs that are on separate private subnets throughout your enterprise?
Definitely. We really don't, we are agnostic to how we get the network. For all we care, you can hire people to write the zeros and ones for us. But, so yeah, you can definitely do that. It's only a question if your networking team can give you, from this area and from this area, the network to that port. But we have seen that configuration, so it's possible. Yeah.
Can you show us the port mirroring on the Hyper-V hosts?
Sorry, did I answer? Who is asking the question now?
I'm over here.
Yeah. Hi.
I was
Okay.
just asking, can you show us how you did the port mirroring on the Hyper-V host so we can just see?
Oh,
how
that's a
that
good
happened?
question. So let me just switch to number 8. Actually, that's an interesting question that I wanted to mention. So the question was, how do I configure port mirror in Hyper-V? So in Hyper-V, you go to the domain controller, right? You go to the NIC, press plus here, advanced features, and then you go port mirroring source. By default, it's none. Do source, you check that, fine. Now you go to the gateway, which has two NICs, one for management and one for capturing. You go to the capture NIC, in my case it's the second one, you go to advanced features, and you just put destination. That's it, it's done. So in a virtual environment, it's very, very easy to set up port mirroring.
So are they
That's a
attached
good
to the
question.
same switch too?
Sorry?
Are they attached to the same virtual switch too?
Yeah, but that's not mandatory.
Cool.
That's a good question.
Please go ahead. You can use the microphone right back.
Yeah, if you can use the microphones, it would be better. I'm going to stay here to at least like
We'll
half an
answer all
hour,
your
so
questions.
take your
We
time.
have time. Go ahead.
Any environment maximums, number of devices, computer accounts, user accounts?
No.
No.
What's your size?
We've got probably 10 domains, 250,000 users.
We've seen bigger.
Okay.
That's fine.
You can share. We have a deployment with
So this is Idan, by the way. Hi, Idan.
250 domain
Actually, more than that now, but okay.
Yeah.
What was the name of that attack simulator you were using to
I wrote that,
test it?
so that's not publicly available.
But by the way, there
But
are public tools.
yeah, like Mimikatz and others you probably heard of.
Yes, I have a question here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there any notification built into these things that system admin will get notified when you guys identify any threat? And also, is there any kind of preventing the threat to continue once you identify the threat?
You mean what's the recommendation? Once we detect something, what do you do?
Yes.
So within the suspicious activity, we have the text that's tailored per suspicious activity to describe what do you need to do. For example, in Pass the Ticket that I just demonstrated, one of the things is to go to the actual devices, see what's going on there, and maybe also disable the user account that was being stolen, just so that it
Yeah,
cannot.
can this be automated? Because the way I'm looking at it is we're talking
you
about
want
human being
automation.
interaction over here. So you have a system that do analytical behavior. The system knows that this thing is not right. Now, before somebody die, can you prevent that person from dying? That's number one. And number two, how can you notify somebody to go and do the second, check of this thing to make sure this is not real?
I'll let Idan answer that.
It's a very good question. Right now, right now the system we do not support automatic remediation or mitigation of the attack.
Yep.
But moving forward, we are thinking about it. You can just shoot us an email. Be part of we have a private preview customers that we share more information. You can be part of it, and when we will have these capabilities, you can play with it before it's public.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can you please show the previous slide with the booth?
So
Yes.
we will
Previous
share
slide
more
with the booth.
information.
I'm sorry.
Demi,
Yes.
where is the?
Yes. You can send email like alerts configured.
You mean
yes.
this one? I think this is this one. What? No, somebody asked to switch to the slide with the booth.
Oh yeah, for the evaluation. Yes. Please, as we're answering questions, please evaluate the session as well.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I got a question here. Do you want to?
Yeah, go to the microphone, guys. It's easier.
Two questions. How does this scale to a large number of domain controllers that are spread around the world?
Okay, so what we have, and again, we don't have the scaling numbers now, but we basically will size according to the amount of traffic. And then I think your question is more about when it's geolocated in various locations, okay? Then you would have a gateway per region or per area, basically. And those gateways would send the parsed traffic. So just to be sure we make that clear, if you have hundreds of megabytes on the domain controller NIC all the time, those hundreds of megabytes will be translated to hundreds of kilobytes. That's how good we do it. And then we send all of that hundreds of kilobytes to one central location somewhere. Okay? So that's how we do it.
Make sense?
Okay, great.
So it seems that your product is actually more tailored towards user behavior and actually preventing threats.
Okay.
Now there is a lot of products out in the market, like Splunk, for example, which does a lot of event captures from various different devices, and does a pretty good job with user behavior and analytics, and the auditing feature. So my question is, how would you differentiate yourself
I'll start my answer.
With giants.
I know Idan is keen to answer
giants
that.
like Splunk.
Okay, so I'll ask this question. Would Splunk have Demi install them in 5 minutes and detect in real-time attacks without doing anything? That's my first answer, and now I'll let Idan continue.
It's not about deployment.
Of course.
It's about protecting. Right?
Yeah, but he asked a very, very good question. If you will do pass the ticket,
will Splunk detect it?
Splunk will never detect it. And this will lead me to the most important thing, and I wrote it, by the way, in a very extensive blog that I wrote. We learned two things. The first one is that logs tells you half of the story in the best case scenario. The evidence for detecting advanced attacks are inside the network packets. And Splunk doesn't do DPI, deep packet inspection, on network traffic. In Splunk, what they are doing is taking NetFlow events or NetFlow packets, which gives you only layer 4 of the packets, which means IP addresses and MAC addresses and destination and source ports, and that's it. They are not looking inside the payload of the Kerberos protocol and combine it with the SMB and LDAP request and make something and build some logical action that the user did. So Splunk doesn't have the capability, the technical capability to detect those kind of attacks or user behavior, which again, user behavior is a very, very large, title. You need to, if I requested the Kerberos ticket from a different computer, you will never be able to detect it from the logs. You must combine network traffic, deep packet inspection, and logs from different sources. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much. That answered my question. Now, a very quick one. How's your product rated in Gartner? How does Gartner actually rating your product?
We actually briefed Gartner very recently, so we acknowledged about the product just last week. So we will see how they're going to rate it within the next month or two, I'm guessing.
But regarding your question, we are part of the UBA Magic Quadrant that Gartner is working on. So this is how they classified our product.
Let's show some love to this side now. Yeah, nobody? Okay, I offered. Okay.
Go ahead.
Very often we have to troubleshoot account lockout issues, and that involves determining ideally the MAC address of the device that's causing the lockout, or IP address of that. Could we use this in conjunction with SIEM to identify a device that's not bound to the domain that's causing lockouts?
The answer is we have...
The short answer is yes.
Yeah, the short answer. But I want to talk a little bit more about this problem, because it's a very, very big problem in enterprises. So what we are doing is, because we can correlate between the behavior of service accounts and the authentication events, and we can also say you are using this password, which is n-1 and n-2 passwords in Active Directory. We can classify this as a non-brute force scenario and say, hey, someone changed, but also combine it with change passwords and from where and which protocols. We can say, hey, this service account, which runs on 100 servers, Benny changed his password, but he replaced it only on 10 servers, and now 90 servers create tons of
with the old one
on the domain controllers. So this makes sense that it's not a security issue, but you need to do something and reset the password on those 90 servers, and this will reduce the amount of failed authentication on the domain controller. Make sense?
Yeah, so we definitely could identify it, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
You can identify, and we can tell you which computers you need to reset passwords on and stuff like this.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What if you're using IaaS, like Azure, and say you have either a portion of your domain controllers on there or all of your domain controllers? How would you get the traffic mirrored in?
So before we answer that, do you have domain controllers on IaaS?
We do, yes.
Okay, cool.
So right now, again, if Azure will support port mirroring, then it's not a problem because I'm sure you have VPN side-to-side between your IaaS and your corporate network.
Correct.
So it's something that we can take offline because I heard this question, I think, more than 20 times in the last 2 weeks. So we can take it offline and we'll give you a card and
Okay, awesome.
This product is in preview right now, but obviously you've had it deployed in production environments for a while. How often do you do updates to it?
So who is asking the question, sorry? Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry.
We just can't see with the lights, but... So what was the question? It's about updates?
Updates.
Yeah, how often do you do updates to it?
So that's something we are going to reveal only on GA, but we will have updates rather frequently.
Yes, and if I add to that, obviously this is a security product and it has to keep being up to date, so there will be updates on the type of known attacks and known security issues we detect, as well as like updates to the diagnostic engine.
I'm thinking more like 0 days, like how fast can
So
your
when
team...
ForgePack was discovered, we had a detection before Microsoft had a patch. So I hope that answers that.
If you do the deployment with, I'm on this side now. Yeah. If you have the deployment for this pure port mirroring, and there are some scenarios where you can't do port mirroring, like in IaaS and maybe some other types of scenarios, is there anything that breaks if you're not actually capturing all of the domain controller traffic, or do you just get a less consistent detection because some
you
PCs
can do
aren't
that.
monitored?
It's less secure, but we definitely have customers that are afraid only in certain regions in the world that something is happening, so they just put it on the domain controllers there to begin with, and they want to, over the year of the project or whatever, they would just deploy it more and more. But
So
definitely you can start with just a few, and you can even remain with just a few. You just need to be aware that you are only protected on those domain controllers.
So it's not a requirement that all are mirrored.
No,
but
there is
you
no
should.
requirement. There is no requirement.
By the way, just to emphasize,
Yeah?
there are some suspicious activities that we can detect only by querying the domain controllers and not analyzing the traffic.
Yeah, like brute force.
Yeah, like offline brute force attacks. I will give you a real-world scenario. We detected, what's the name of the malware?
Conflict.
I'm sorry?
Which ran
Yes, enterprise mobility. Both, if you go to cloud platform, under cloud platform there's enterprise mobility, and we have a table called advanced threat analytics. Yes.
Querying is higher up the chain and it's got more traffic than your domain controller. That's okay?
So it's a good question. We prefer not to. We need only the port of the domain controllers, because in this scenario, in some cases, if you have old switches, it can do overload on the switches. So this is why we want only the port of the domain controllers, and we don't want to interfere in any other.
And I just want to.
But having said that, we can, if you do it, we can filter the relevant information in our product, so you can.
I just want to emphasize on what Idan said. It's basically who does the heavy lifting. If you want the switch to do the heavy lifting in the configuration and just give us what we want, or if you want us to do the heavy lifting. If you want us to do the heavy lifting, we need more cores, because we would need to deal with more traffic, parse out the irrelevant ones from the relevant ones. So it all depends where you want the heavy lifting to be done.
By the way, who asked about the updates?
At the back? Yeah.
How does this product handle cross-forest trust detection?
So at the moment, we deal with one forest. In the future, not sure when yet, can't disclose, we will support multi-forest environments.
Thank you.
We will work and we will resolve everything except for those that are across. But sometime, soon or later, we will support everything, all of the scenarios.
For a small branch office with low activity DC, can we install the gateway on the DC
Can you
itself?
speak up, please?
Can we install the gateway on the DC itself for a DC with on a small branch office with low activity?
So can you repeat the question?
The gateway, can we install it on a domain controller itself?
Technically, you can. I wouldn't do it. It's not recommended.
We have a small branch office where there is sometimes just one DC. We have nothing else on the office. If we want to capture the traffic of the DC in this office, how do we do it?
So the problem is that, well, technically you can. The answer is you can do it. We don't have the support guideline yet published on TechNet on why yes or no, but basically the gateway is very CPU heavy because it's taking a lot of traffic, it's doing a lot of real-time parsing and moving that around. So it will compete with resources with the domain controller. That's what you need to be aware of. If you are fine with that and you monitor that, then that can work, yeah.
Will there be a management pack for Operation Manager so you can get all your information on one?
So at the moment, there is no management pack. Maybe in the future we will have, not something I disclose at the moment. But Operation Manager traditionally it's not the security operations focal point. It's not like the SIM. So that's why at the moment we don't have anything for that. But we will probably have something in the future.
But that's a question that we get, and that's something that we explore with the System Center team.
What executive roll-up reports are available for budget justification?
Can you repeat the question? Did you hear?
Roll-up reports?
Yes, roll-up executive reports to help in budget justification if you want to buy it, type of thing.
Just show them the timeline.
The timeline, is very tactical, but executives like to see roll-up reports and that, and the value add.
We started working, before the acquisition, we started working on reports for executive reports. It's a good feedback.
And this is one of the reasons that we have public preview, because we want to get that feedback from you.
Exactly.
And this feedback actually is like something that pretty much builds the list that we want to work for general availability. That's great feedback, and we can take that offline and follow up.
Thanks.
We have a multi-forest design. How many of these installations would we need?
How many forests?
About 17 forests.
So at the moment you will need 17 centers.
And how would they communicate with each other? Because there could be past hash attacks.
At the moment they don't. In the very near, or not so near, I can disclose, we will have support for multi-forest.
Okay. Thank you.
Specific to the updates, any issue in an air-gap environment, do you provide the updates?
No, we will support the ability to just take the package, air-gap it into the environment, and just dump it, and it will update everything.
So updates to the package once installed, you can just download them and move them. Okay,
definitely.
Thanks.
Sure.
Does the center and the
Gateway?
The gateway, can they be installed on a server core and remotely managed?
On a server core?
On server core, can they be installed on
So
server
we
core?
haven't tested that yet. That's a scenario we're looking into. We will definitely publish guidelines for that near GA.
Do you support 2012 R2 or?
We support, that's a good question. We only support 2012 R2 at the moment. I mean, for our server. The rest of the network can be whatever it is.
Domain controllers can be any.
Whatever, yeah. Our server where we deploy our software on needs to be 2012 R2.
It can't be 2008 R2?
No. Yeah.
So I realize there's a question for branch office scenarios and geo separation.
Okay.
So the question will be, what about for disruptions, and how is the gateway server going to cache the data, and how long does it keep until it says no,
if there is an issue to communicate with so that's all configurable. We have that in the configuration by default. And again, this is depending on the configuration and the amount of traffic coming in. So if it's very lightweight, it can be days. But if it's very, very heavy duty and a lot of traffic, then minutes. But if you are aware that, okay, for this amount of traffic in this branch office, I tested it once, right, let's say, and then you see, it's only 20 minutes, and you want it to be an hour because that's the SLA for your network when they from the time they go down to the time they go back up. You just reconfigure the buffer that we send, and that's it. It's all.
So it depends on how much storage that we have on the server?
It's not storage.
It's not storage.
On gateway is stateless, so it's in memory.
Oh, it's only in memory.
Yeah, but as I said, the entire traffic, which is hundreds of megabytes, gets converted to hundreds of kilobytes. So we're okay with that.
Because the problem is we have really slow WAN links and occasionally disrupts. So in sometimes it might be down for a day or something. So is there any options for example, to store those data in the hard drive pending transmission?
So that's a very I need to understand your environment a bit more, because then maybe I would recommend having a center actually near that. But to the beginning of your question, we can just configure the buffers to be a bit bigger, and then it would store everything there. And once the center is back up or the one link is back up, they would just send whatever they have. So,
sure, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we segregate how it's used as far as we know it's a forest, but can you go down to the subdomain? Can you go down into user groups?
Yeah.
You might not want to see everything, 25,000 users. Maybe you only want to see 5,000 users.
Well,
in your group.
We're agnostic to it. I mean, within minutes, we will have visibility for everything. If you, for some reason, want only to monitor just a subgroup of your domains or users, you can definitely do that. You can just install it on the domain controllers on that domain, and then we will monitor only that domain.
Well, they're all the same domain.
No,
so I didn't understand the question, maybe.
No, you cannot configure our product to listen only to a specific
like
user,
OU?
a specific OU or specific users inside a group. We are agnostic. We will learn everything in this domain. So you don't have any option to configure.
So our minimum set is a domain. That's the minimum set we learn and monitor. You cannot go below a domain from our perspective.
Is there a shelf life for how long you're going to be using MongoDB before you do SQL?
Sorry?
Right now you're using MongoDB, but is it only for a period until you convert to SQL?
No. We will not convert to SQL.
Why not? I don't know anything. Yeah, I don't know anything about MongoDB. So why MongoDB?
Well, you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of things. First of all, we need a NoSQL database because we have a lot of unstructured data. That's for one thing. The second thing is the amount of NoSQL operations that we are making, and the way we want to scale this out just doesn't fit with the traditional general SQL databases like SQL, but others as well, by the way.
So it's because it's actually not a SQL structured database. It's a NoSQL.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
A good question.
Did I understand you to say that I know we have to have a center per domain, or at least per forest? Will there, maybe you can answer, in the future be one center to rule all centers, so that way you can consolidate all data into one rather than having to go to each center to get reports?
I think they will upload it to YouTube as well. We will make sure that happens.
Okay.
Any more questions, guys?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question. So in my organization, we use, I missed this session, so I'm not sure if you've already spoken to this. I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak to it. We use a technology called RSA, Adaptive Authentication. It's a Java application. It uses a SQL Server backend. Users enroll in using their accounts. Once you're enrolled, if your account is being used in a high-risk scenario, geographic, new machine, et cetera, you're asked to step up, which means you're asked to challenge by responding to a phone number or something like that. It's basically two-factor. I heard you speak of this technology, or I heard during the keynote at the beginning of this conference. Can you speak to how this technology compares to RSA Adaptive Authentication to the best of your knowledge? What are the advantages of migrating to this? And could you speak a little bit more about the database issues you're having with this technology as identified by this gentleman? Adaptive authentication requires one global database, and then it's good for the entire enterprise because it's per account. So maybe you could talk about the advantages of this technology, not just in terms of what it can do, cost, but to be transparent as well as some of the issues in the back end. Thank you.
So adaptive authentication is totally different technology from what we are doing. This technology basically provides fraud detection and less than corporate internal attacks. But having said that, they are focusing on only the access, only the authentication to a computer, and not looking at how your peers behave, or the resolution that we look inside the Kerberos tickets and what you are doing, and if you are allowed to do that or not. It's a different mindset. If they are seeing, I don't know, suspicion authentication to a computer, they will ask you to authenticate again, to step up with the authentication. It's to basically to provide fraud. Demi compare it to a fraud, but it's not the actual purpose of ATA, of Microsoft ATA. It's the corporate attacks that you see in the advanced attacks that happen today, and not fraud detection or prevention.
Understood. I heard in the keynote that they were talking about geographic. For example, if you went from New York to Korea in 20 minutes, that would be suspicious.
So
Adaptive authentication does something like that, of course, very similar.
So let's take this scenario, for example.
Yes.
In our product, we will look into the locations inside the corporate. So for example, if you are now logging to New York and you connected through a VPN and you logged into a domain controller in London in, I don't know, some unreasonable time, then we will detect this, not outside the organization.
Okay. Not physical outside geographic location, but network topology geographic location.
Exactly.
I
We
understand.
are looking for insider threats.
Understood.
This is
okay.
But also
Insider
outside
corporate
attacks,
threats.
but manifest inside the organization.
Yeah.
All outside attacks eventually goes inside the organization. So.
Okay. Is this solution built into Windows 2012, or is it?
What do you mean built into?
No.
Like
It's not-
it's
it's
not a role.
separate.
It's not
It's
a
a
role
separate solution.
that you
Separate.
just tick and next. It's just we have our own deployment. It's like any other software product you deploy on a server. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I heard you say that it does deep packet inspection for Kerberos. Does it also do this for NTLM v2?
NTLM, LDAP, Espinego, SMB, what else?
DNS.
DNS, of course. Thanks. And other protocols.
NetBIOS,
LDAP. I said LDAP.
Yeah.
So all protocols that the domain controller.
Active Directory relevance protocols.
Okay.
So we have a question about secure LDAP. We do not support secure LDAP right now, but it's in the.
So basically, if you give a certificate, so you can open it.
Exactly. Exactly.
You had said that in the presentation that you do resolve. You resolve the computer name to the Active Directory domain.
Mm-hmm.
What if we're not using? What if we're running a disjointed DNS namespace? For instance, our machines may be joined to the domain, but they may actually have a disjointed name DNS to our more corporate DNS high availability DNS solution.
We saw this architecture in a few customers in a few environments. So we are not relying only on DNS. We are combining between other resolution mechanisms, and we combine them together. Plus, we have a patent pending technology for name resolution, which also take hints from the network traffic and combine it together with the behaviors and DNS and
To understand that this is your actual computer.
And by the way, this is, and Benny, I think, talked about it in his presentation. This is in every security product, there is a problem with name resolution. Because all the security product looks at, even other products, IT product, looks at the IP address. And the IP address is not the relevant entity. The IP address can change when you logged into wireless and you have GTP and you whatever. So we cannot rely on IP addresses. If we will rely only on IP addresses, we'll create a lot of false positives. And this is why we invested, I think,
A lot of time.
Yeah, more than a year just to research name resolution and how we can combine different data sources to give you a very, very strong evidence that this was the actual computer that did this action.
So in the demo you did, is there any chance that you can see what content you actually accessed while you stole that tick? Or will it just tell you that tick has been stolen, not that you accessed a specific file? Or
Because, it's a question that we hear from customers. Because we are not analyzing, when you access a file share, only the authentication and authorization goes through Active Directory. The actual SMB session between the client and the server doesn't go through Active Directory. So we cannot analyze this traffic. But it's a good question. Right now we cannot do that.
But that's an area we are looking into.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting.
Okay, I'm going to try a question that you might not be able to answer.
So don't ask it.
So, as we venture into the cloud, right, and we start providing those SaaS type of application services to mobile devices, but using our internal identity store with a federation to those cloud service providers. So when those people coming from outside authenticate our directory, you probably, I don't know, how would you be able to translate, whether it's just coming from a service, federated service, or a specific user?
Just so I will be 100% sure that I understand the scenario. So you are authenticating against a cloud service.
So let's say Office 365, right?
Okay.
So I build a federation with them,
Okay.
but I'm letting my user to actually go outside of my company, connect to Office 365, write the tunnel back to my domain controller.
And authenticate through an ADFS server, which will authenticate to the... So right now, we don't know if this is an external user or not in this scenario. In other scenarios, we know. But what we are working on is to integrate with ADFS and understand that this summon token was translated into a Kerberos token, and we can mark this user as a remote user or external user to authenticate. And maybe, and again, I'm thinking loudly, maybe we can build a different behavioral model on external users. It's a good point.
Okay.
But along the way, we will have a hybrid identity security solution, of course.
Exactly.
That's going to happen.
What does it mean?
We can't share the details on that yet, I think.
Even if you specifically know some details, we cannot share all the details about it.
Okay. I guess in general, what does it mean, hybrid identity security?
Well, hybrid means like on-prem and cloud. That's hybrid.
Okay, but usually it's one data store, right? You either have it internally or you have it on the cloud.
No, you have Azure AD and you have on-prem AD. So having an identity on both, that's a hybrid scenario. You can have VMs running on your private cloud and then VMs running on the public cloud, and that's a hybrid scenario as well for VMs. So the identity can be in hybrid mode as well.
Okay, thanks. Good presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We really appreciate your feedback. So if you can rate the session,
thanks, guys.
that'd be great. Thank you.